The top tech trends for 2021 CES and beyond. Welcome to What's Next, Living Longer, Better, Smarter. This edition is made possible by AARP Innovation Labs, fostering the growth of disruptive startups that empower people to choose how they live as they age. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with Mary Furlong. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Fred.
Joining us to help us sort through some of the more interesting new products, we have some great guests. Rick Robinson is VP of Startup Engagement at AARP Innovation Labs. Hi, Rick.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Steve Ewell is Executive Director at the Consumer Technology Association Foundation. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Very happy to join you both.
And from one of those innovative companies, Dr. Katy Forth, CEO and founder of Zibrio. Thanks, Katy.
Thank you so much for having me, Fred.
Let's set the stage first with you, Steve. CES continued the trend of highlighting technologies that benefit older adults and people with disabilities, but they had to do this in a virtual way this year, with everything being done online, obviously, with the pandemic. So tell us about the work that you're doing, and did things change for you because of the pandemic?
Absolutely. Well, hey, for all of us, things certainly changed over the last year, but I am just incredibly thrilled with how we were able to adjust from a large in-person show in Las Vegas to creating a digital experience and being able to continue to highlight the technologies that can really help all consumers, but in particular from the CTA Foundation's perspective, our focus is on how technology can help older adults and people with disabilities. So we're always thrilled to see the types of technologies that can be there. Things like AARP, who had a large presence at the show and brought a lot of great startups, to technologies like Katy's with Zibrio and the work that they're doing. And they were one of our startup winners or pitch contest winners last year. So we were really pleased to have them back. But it really was an opportunity to highlight from the programming that we had at the show to, we have a big roundtable where we have a lot of discussion between advocates and industry about what's working and what's not, as well as interviews. The CTA Foundation had over 40 interviews with everything from sports stars to innovators and companies to nonprofit organizations and others that are doing work like this, so that we could really call attention to the types of technologies that are helping older adults and people with disabilities.
So are you seeing a lot of innovation in both areas for older adults and for people with disabilities, one more than the other, or is it a real mix here?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say necessarily one versus the other, but we are certainly seeing major innovations in both spaces. It's one of those things where accessibility of product design really can help all consumers. So when you make a device that works well for someone with vision loss or someone with mobility decline, that's going to help an older adult. It's also going to help a younger person who might have a disability. And quite frankly, it might help all of us when we just happen to be walking around with a bunch of groceries in our hands or whatever else we're doing. So we're really focused on helping technology companies understand the importance of that kind of design and the opportunities by bringing those types of accessible technologies into the mainstream general consumer products. We can take advantage of some of those economies of scale to really bring down some of the costs, raise the availability of these types of technologies. And the companies are recognizing, they're seeing the demographic trends. And I know, certainly with this panel here, I don't need to go into all the demographic trends. You guys are experts on all of this, but they're seeing the opportunities and understanding that while I'm the CTA Foundation's a public charity, my goal is not to necessarily sell products, it's to make products that are really going to help the consumers that are out there. So I look at it as, yes, it's the good thing to do, but quite frankly, when I'm having conversations with a lot of these businesses, it's the right business move as well. There's a great opportunity for them from a business component and a social component.
Fred, I was sorry I didn't get to walk the floor as I've had for many years. I didn't miss the taxi line in Las Vegas, but I'm curious, did you see, Rick, any new large companies pivoting into the space? We had Microsoft at our conference a couple of weeks ago at JP Morgan Healthcare, adjacent conference, but are there some new interests on larger companies?
Well, yeah, you definitely are seeing companies, as you would expect, like Google and Amazon and Apple, P&G, and others trying to, I don't know if it's pivot, but reach into a space like the 50 plus sector by providing products that really talk to a different audience, but with modern, approachable, accessible products. So we definitely are finally seeing some larger organizations understanding this market, 50 plus market, which we look at as like an $8 trillion economy in and of itself, is something that's kind of been overlooked. And we're excited by some of the moves of some of the larger companies, but even more so the opportunities by some of the startups who we're working with and hope to work with, who are really shaking things up in this space.
Now, I'm 72. I just had my vaccine this week. And the boomers this year are 75 at the top end, right? And so there are different tiers. There are people in their 90s, 80s, 70s. And a lot of us are either thriving on the go or aging in place at home. So tell us about what happens in the hatchery where you are. I love that energy of that building, and I love
here we are.
The mandate you have. So for the older adults in the audience, let them know what happens there and how important your work is.
Yeah, so the hatchery is a physical space, and you can kind of see it behind me. We are the AARP Innovation Labs. I run the startup engagement part of the lab. And essentially, we want to be the sort of flywheel for age tech startups by taking a very holistic approach, by offering a variety of support to companies who come into our portfolio. So with startup engagement, we look for startups, usually early stage, who are kind of in the health tech, fintech, but also in this fun and fulfillment category. And these all ladder up to larger AARP strategies. So we look for these companies, and we do that by working with my counterpart who runs startup programming for the lab. And they source startups through pitch competitions, challenges. We work with accelerators, a variety of ways to get a lot of incoming startups. So again, at an early stage. And so we decide to work with them. They decide to work with us. And we figure out the best things that we can do together to, frankly, make these startups successful. And that could be a variety of things, from research, original research, or research that AARP has in its library, connections to experts in the field, of course, mentorship from people like myself who have been with startups in the past, as well as experts inside of AARP. Test beds and sandboxes, these are really interesting. We're going to be expanding these dramatically in 2021. These are real life environments where our startups can trial their products. And then co-creation. This is where we might work with a startup to say, hey, let's build something together. And the result perhaps is owned by the startup. And why would we do that? Well, again, we want to have great modern solutions out into the world, but we also take investment in companies. So, there's an opportunity there for us to work together on that front. So again, holistic approach, bring in ambitious, modern thinking startups who have groundbreaking solutions or new twists with technology that are providing accessible products, and try to make them as successful as we can. So that's kind of what we do in the lab.
Well, a lot of us card-carrying AARP members might be surprised to learn that you're doing that. I mean, that kind of work, we know we get a free donut with a coffee, maybe, but we don't know that you're doing that.
Absolutely, we get that all the time.
Case in point, one of the companies is Zibrio. So Katy, tell us more about the company and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a smart scale, just like a regular weighing scale, but this one's much more clever. You stand on it, it measures your weight, it measures your balance, and it can predict if you're going to fall down in the next 12 months. But we don't want to just leave it there, because once you know where you are, you actually want to do something about it. And we have software products for the individual, for a physician, to be able to then guide people through with personalized care so that they can improve.
And of course, mobility is one of the 5 big areas, just as Steve was talking about, every dissidence of aging is a market opportunity, but your gait is a big indicator of risk, right? So if you can do this early detection, that's really important.
Well, that's the thing is that, so yes, people think about gait. We actually have technologies that can identify dynamic problems even when you're standing still. So we don't actually have to get you to walk to even get this level of measurement and prediction. And so if you can measure it, you can then do something about it. And we can see, yes, we can predict 12 months in advance, but you can also then track yourself to see, well, okay, I'm starting a new exercise class. Is it working? You can see and measure yourself to see if, in fact, it's doing its job for you, or maybe you do, in fact, need something else. Perhaps it's you have some issues with sleep. One bad night's sleep can drop your score dramatically, up to 40% even. So you don't know what's affecting you in your balance and your fall risk until you actually measure it. And that's where we come in to empower people to measure. And then now you've got the information. You're not flying blind anymore. You can actually do something about it.
Well, Katy, I'm really fascinated. I love tech. And I don't want you to give away any patent secrets or anything, but how do you do that?
Well, we're spinning out of NASA. So, the epitome of innovation, spaceflight. We originally invented this for astronauts on the moon to actually go into their moon boots. We quickly realized that this can help so many more people here on Earth. So rather than just making it available to a few astronauts, let's really try and save the world from falling down as well. So how does it work? You stand on a scale. We're measuring the pressure under your feet. And if you imagine your center of gravity just around your belly button, project that down onto the scale. As you're standing, you're never standing still. It's impossible. You can try it at home, do it safely, but you actually can't stand still. And those little tiny movements, we're measuring that, but then we apply artificial intelligence to it to cluster where we can see when the body is in control, stable, or when there's these moments of micro failure. So the body is failing to control itself. You can't perceive it, but we can measure it. And that's the key that can actually predict whether someone's going to fall down in the future.
That's really, really interesting. So you can tell me that I'm at risk 6 months from now, just by the way I'm standing on the scale. And I know we all move
Absolutely.
because I love photography. And if you try to shoot a picture at a slow shutter speed, you're never going to be standing still. It's going to be blurry. So
Exactly right. And it's not a question of how much you move. It's the question of, it's just how well are you controlling yourself? And so if you think about falling, you could sit in a chair all year long and not fall down because you're sitting in a chair. But if you actually want to have a really vibrant life, go dancing at weddings, hopefully when there are weddings, but engage with life and your grandchildren, you need to have a level of capability of controlling your balance to be able to do that successfully without falling down. So falling's a funny thing because it's actually 2 parts. It's how well is your body controlling itself, and also what opportunity is there to fall down. If you start hiking, looking up at birds' nests, you might be more likely to fall down than if you were just walking on a flat surface, for example. But how well you control yourself is the fundamental piece for how well you're going to navigate through this world and through different endeavors.
So how did this come about? I mean, what got you into this? Tell us the story.
I think I've always been very interested in balance, just as a fundamental piece. I am an athlete. I competed gymnastics as among many of my sports I competed. And when you're on a balance beam, you understand balance in a different way than perhaps when you're flat on the ground. But then we got to the point where my grandmother, who in her mid-80s, she was very athletic, but she did fall down some stairs, and she broke her hip and broke her wrist. And this ultimately led to her demise. And it was just so painful to watch her, the loss of dignity that happens when you lose mobility, the inability to engage in the life around you. And for her, dementia started to set in as she was less mobile. So this is a very common spiral downwards that happens once a fall occurs. And the falling part is the preventable piece. So when you have the power at your fingertips, once you have this invention that can truly help people, not just prevent the falls, but to prevent all of that anguish and pain, it was an easy choice. We just had to do it.
Fred, I think that what's important here too is the business model. And I know that, Rick, you help the companies figure out the business model, and just the sheer cost of someone falling in senior housing or home care can be a big liability. So I think you have a lot of opportunity. And I just want to underscore what you were saying about helping companies with their plans and their iteration and how many times you have to revise the product and then get the word out there. The other thing I like about what you're doing, Katy, is the locus of control is with the person themselves. So it's not like this monitoring of the person. You can go in and figure out your own gait issues, right?
Absolutely. We are not surveillance, and we are so passionate about that. And here's an interesting finding from one of our studies. When we left a scale in a senior living facility just for open use, there was a 54% reduction in falls that particular year. We didn't give them an intervention. We just gave them their score. But they were able to keep measuring themselves, and they were empowered. They were able to see when they did things, their score went up. When they didn't do their exercise, they saw their score go down, as well as many other lifestyle features. But that empowering piece, we all know it with Fitbit. It's the Fitbit effect. If you measure it, you can do something about it. And empowering an individual to truly take control of this it's a wonderful thing to see. And that's why AARP is perfectly aligned with us as a partner.
Yeah, Katy, I had a question on that front. With falling, are you looking primarily at sort of degradation of things inside the inner ear, or is this more related to somebody's overall support of their frame?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And actually, this is one of the things that we've been working with the AARP design team, because education of balance is very much necessary. People just assume balance is fixed. It's once you're older, it's gone and that's it. But no, it changes day to day, and it actually changes within the day. There's over 21 risk factors for falling that can include your inner ear, can include your vision, and another 19 features, as I mentioned, with sleep, that can have a dramatic effect. Medications, the list goes on and on, even just how positive you're feeling. So if you have a fear of falling, that increases your chance of falling. So it's very complicated, multifactorial, but the education piece and how we can actually help people to understand that it is possible to improve, that's the starting point with the older adults. And we've learned how to communicate that better with our work with AARP as well.
Is that done through an app, the advice that you're giving people, or how are you telling them what they can do about it?
It is. So we have an app that allows the individual to track their score. It's a connected scale, so they can see their scores over time. We provide a chance to explore. We call them the 6 pillars of balance. So they can explore what's helping and hurting my balance. And then they get a personalized wellness plan, which further helps guide them through. We're really trying to empower them so that they can learn, they can then make good choices for themselves. At the same time, in the clinical setting, we're also providing physicians' recommendation reports. So this is now software that helps take in all the information and then provide a prioritized plan and recommendation to physicians so that now they can produce counseling in a very short amount of time, because I think we all know physicians don't have a time in one appointment to cover 21 risk factors. So let's get down to the thing that's most important for that particular patient. If you start giving generalized advice, people don't absorb it and an action isn't taken.
Steve, turning back to you at the CTA Foundation, what are the types of technologies on the horizon, maybe, that excite you the most? You see so much.
Yeah, there's quite a few that I'm excited for. And, I think it's such an opportunity for innovation right now. I mean, we see things like Katy's technology, where I remember years ago going to a university where, gate management was a gigantic room with cameras all over the place, going from that to being something that's in someone's home and they're able to manage that and get that information. It's so incredible to see that innovation. But, we're seeing real opportunities kind of across the entire consumer technology spectrum. Certainly, digital health has been a massive expansion over the last year. I mean, we saw in 2020 telehealth, digital appointments for telehealth increased by 10 times over the course of 15 days in 2020. And it's just one of those things that we're going to continue to see that even as things start to open back up. We're going to continue to see things like telehealth be used and expanded. I just had a chance to visit one of my doctors through a telehealth appointment, and it's great versus the, going to sit in the waiting room and just do the 5-minute, yep, I'm still here conversation when you're not doing kind of the more thorough evaluations. I think it's a great opportunity as we look at that continuing to emerge. Certainly things like smart home are something that we're going to continue to see emerging. We're seeing more and more different pieces of the home and seeing ways that can all be pulled together, and using things like voice assistants. That's helping give people a number of different ways of controlling their devices, controlling their homes, and integrating all that information into usable pieces of information for both the individual as well as their caregivers if they want to share that information. And that's a privacy setting that they're able to set and be able to share. So we're seeing great innovations in that space as well. Certainly when we look at things like, even vehicle technology, vehicles are, I love diving into the vehicles, and that's everything from the driver assist technology that can help people who are driving continue to be safer on the road, to looking at the self-driving vehicles and what impact that will have moving forward. Underlying a lot of these technologies is AI, and that's something that I think is really exciting. It's something that's, quite frankly, not necessarily something that consumers are going to see themselves. You don't go out and pick up the latest AI off the shelf at Best Buy or order it from Amazon, but it's something that's underlying a lot of these different technologies, and it allows these technologies to continue to develop and be personalized for people, for what they're looking for. It'll continue to customize itself for your needs and continue to improve the product. So we're really excited to see the types of innovation that are going on in this space. We participate in a program that Joe Coughlin did up at MIT Age Lab towards the end of last year, looking at the impact that AI is going to have on the aging population. And I see a lot of opportunities in this space moving forward. But really, I would say if you walk the whole halls of CES virtually this year, from one end to the next, you're going to see technologies that are going to make a difference in the lives of older adults and people with disabilities.
Fred,
And your feet don't hurt.
And your feet don't hurt, exactly.
Also, one of the things we've seen is a giant uptick inside senior communities in downloading TED Talks, like an 8,500% increase in people watching content. So we'd love to learn more about your YouTube channel. I'm so glad you did these interviews, because we have the most well-educated older adult audience we've ever had, and they're very interested in technology. And so we'll have to link our podcast here to your YouTube channel. And I assume we'll find the interviews there, correct?
Absolutely. Everything is on our YouTube channel. You can just search CTA Foundation, or you can go to ctafoundation.tech, and we have all the information on there as well. But yeah, we normally at CES, we have an opportunity where we have a stage there where we do a lot of one-on-one interviews. And, you know, this year, because it was a digital show, quite frankly, we were able to ramp that up even further. Whereas normally it's me and a bunch of the other CTA teams all competing for time on that stage. Well, guess what? In a digital world, we have as much time as we need. So we went out and yeah, there were over 40 interviews that we did, a bunch of different programs, one of which really interesting. We had worked with the Administration for Community Living this year on their Mental Health Innovation Challenge. And this is originally a challenge where they came together and said, okay, during the pandemic, we want to reach 10 million socially isolated older adults and people with disabilities. And, you know, originally when we started having these conversations, I was like, I don't know. I mean, that's a big goal to try to undertake in this time frame. They launched this challenge on challenge.gov. We were involved. The AARP Foundation was involved. A number of organizations around the country got engaged in this. They had I think about 38 different organizations submit with essentially services that can help people identify both the services and the technologies that can help them address social isolation. And ultimately, they narrowed it down to two, No Wrong Door, Virginia, and United Way Worldwide. And they brought both of them to Digital CES. We had a number of the government partners and others get involved, and we had a chance to announce, actually, the winner ended up being both of them. They decided that there were really expertise that both of them brought to the table, that by forming a joint partnership between the two of them, we're going to end up having an even better solution. And they're working with the AARP Foundation to build out that clearinghouse now. So we were able to announce that at CES, but we also had, you know, always the fun interviews as well. Had a chance to talk to Lex Gillette, who is a world record holding Paralympian in the long jump, who's blind, and just talking about the ways he uses technology and, you know, the 16 steps from when he gets started to knowing he's going down and just measuring, you know, what was it about that jump that got him an extra foot, or maybe didn't quite get him so far, and being able to share that. But also, you know, one of the exciting things was he was sharing how he's involved with the LA Olympics in 2028, and they're customizing logos for each of the athletes. But he was blind, so they designed this this logo for him, but he had no idea what it looked like. They were able to 3D print that for him, send him a copy so he could really feel, you know, what that logo looks like for him. And you'll be able to hear kind of his story. But we also had a chance to talk to a number of companies and others that are doing work in this space. So yeah, I highly encourage people to take a look at our channel. There's a lot of great interviews on there. And, you know, not just having to listen to me as well. I have a number of my board members who did interviews too. So, you know, Marty Cooper, who invented the cell phone, he just released a new book, and Robin Raskin, who I'm sure others on the call know as well, had a great interview. They're both Consumer Technology Hall of Famers. So it was a great opportunity to have two Hall of Famers having a conversation about, you know, such an important technology and how that developed in our lives.
Terrific.
Robin Wentz interviewed me many years ago for Yahoo Internet Life, and the cover said, "Yes, I'm gray," because that was many years ago. But Rick, you must see the growth of investor interest, but you dealt with the issues of loneliness and isolation too at AARP. I'd love to know what you think's on the horizon, and also how are you dealing with the digital divide? So, you know, this isolation hits people who don't have the capacity or the technology right now. And that's a big part of the older adult population, right? About 30%, I think. Is that correct?
Yes, there is certainly a segment of the population, as part of, as you point out, the digital divide. And this has been something AARP writ large has been looking at and provided a number of different kinds of solutions through whether it's through our volunteers or through the foundation, and also now through the Innovation Lab. As we look at startups, we're not only looking at companies that you can take advantage of through your cell phone or through your computer, but perhaps other ways. As you mentioned, social isolation, it's also been a huge issue that we've been focusing on for years. And it was unfortunately magnified over the past year because of COVID-19. In response to that, the Innovation Lab built something called AARP Community Connections. And what that was an aggregation of groups that you could join across the country. You could either create one or join one, and provide direct connection with people who are, well, let's face it, trapped in their homes. It was everything from delivering medicine to food and that sort of thing. That is still live and still being utilized by thousands of people. We built onto it also the ability for anybody who is disconnected but has a phone of any kind to be able to call. It's called Friendly Voice, and they can call and receive a volunteer on the other end and just talk to them about anything. This is a time of deep loneliness for a lot of people, and it's something that we think should remain at the forefront of what we're looking at, and Community Connections definitely tries to address that, along with some of the other products that we're trying to bring to market through our startup partners. But as I mentioned, we're also looking at areas of health tech and fintech, along with social connection. And there's a lot of interesting technology that's finally kind of being deployed in a way that's addressing a market that hasn't been addressed in the past. And we want to give startups, young companies who are doing this, frankly, an unfair advantage by working with us to, again, kind of use us as a flywheel to get themselves out there. And then you mentioned venture capitalists. I do talk to them as well. Former colleagues of mine from years past are now, some of them well-known VCs in the Valley and New York, as well as in the DC area. And talking to them to tell them the story, to get them interested on a couple of levels, not the least of which is, again, this is a giant market in terms of value. But we want to, the message there is not only should they be interested, we want them to get hungry, smart entrepreneurs who may be thinking about doing a social app to instead take that energy and innovation and pour it into something that has perhaps even a larger market and a more fruitful market. So we're trying to attack it from multiple angles. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, going directly to our own avenues like pitch competitions and challenges and accelerators to find startups directly ourselves. Finally, if anyone is out there listening and thinking, I'd like to be part of that, you should go to AARPinnovationlabs.org. You can learn all about how you can be part of what we're doing. And we'd love to talk to you.
Terrific, Rick. And Katy, tell us more about how people can get hold of the Zibrio scale and where people would find it, what the process is there, and maybe a little about where you want to go from here. Are there other devices you're looking at or more capabilities?
Yeah, well, so on our website, people can actually order the scales. So that's zibrio.com, zibrio.com. And I think, where do we want to go? We want anybody who wants to measure their balance, know where they are, be able to plan for a better future with respect to their mobility. We want to make sure that they have access to our tool, whether it's they purchase it for themselves or that they can access it in their doctor's office or in a community program. These are all areas that our scale can be utilized. I think for us, the future is to be able to create further insights. As we pull in more data, we can analyze those data to determine, well, okay, what type of fall are you most likely to experience? we actually already have those answers. But even further things like how affecting is my medication? When I sleep, how many days does that affect me? All these wonderful questions that, as we have growing data sets, we should be able to answer those questions. And as you get those insights, you now can make it even more specific, even more personalized in terms of the insights and care to an individual, so that, I mean, we should be preventing the vast majority of falls.
And can you give us an idea at all about the pricing? And is there a subscription model attached as well?
So for the at-home scale, it's $299. There is the opportunity to have some extra features within the app that is a subscription, but the base level is free and available. Within the clinical settings, those are in clinical bundles. That is a subscription because it includes the full risk management software for them so that they can manage their populations. So within the clinical context, it really varies on what they put in their bundle.
Terrific. Well, Rick, Steve, Katy, thank you so much for taking the time with us, and really congratulations on the innovations that you've accomplished and that you're fostering. Really, really terrific. Well, Mary, that was such a great discussion with these people who are doing so much to bring new products into the market that will be so helpful to so many.
Right. I wanted to tell you, on my bookshelf, I'm reading this book called 10 Types of Innovation, The Discipline of Building Breakthroughs by Larry Keeley. And when I listened to the innovations that they were talking about that they saw, I felt, wow, let's go watch those videos, or let's get involved in the AARP Innovation Lab and see what they're doing. So I love the descriptions that they shared, and also the fact that they see the business opportunity to invest resources and time and energy. And wasn't that entrepreneur terrific too?
Really a fascinating product, and I'm interested in learning a lot more about, and will be. But CES, I mean, always has so much there. It's more than you can really take in, even spending 3 or 4 days there, because there are so many companies there, and they pulled it off, having to do it virtually. We really congratulate them on what they were able to achieve with a virtual CES this year. I mean, I talked to some companies that were involved. One has a high-tech face mask. You knew that was coming, right? A company called AirPop, but so many different advances focused on helping people through the pandemic and keeping us healthy.
It's one of the reasons I'm happy we have the podcast, because we can be part of the connective tissue to these great resources that exist, that sometimes week to week so much happens that we forget that all of that content is available and all of this good work going on. And also, I've always loved the AARP volunteers. They help with safe driving, they help with legal aid, they help with tax aid, and now they're getting involved helping with this terrible issue around loneliness. I do hope that both CES and AARP look hard this year at the digital divide and make sure that we can see new rules and legislation that makes available technology to everyone. So I think it is a new chance to look at the digital divide.
We're going to see more competition when it comes to internet providers, whether it's the satellite technology that Elon Musk has worked on, and 5G technology being pushed out into our homes as an alternative, because where there's competition, I think it turns out to be a little better for the consumer here.
Right. And I already talked to an entrepreneur this morning that was doing things related to safe openings of your house and people coming into your house, and safe openings of restaurants. And how do you know everything is as clean as it can be? So I think
one of the companies that I think you're familiar with too, LifeSmart, has a product out there, really a home appliance, a box that it's called, I think, True Wash.
Right.
That allows you to sanitize everything from your mail to your keys to your phone to the tomatoes and produce that you buy at the supermarket. It can handle all of that. And it's a countertop kitchen type appliance.
That's what I was talking about. And who would have guessed how many people touch your tomatoes before you bring them home? So we have to learn about all these new categories. So it was very exciting. I think we're off to a great start this January, right? With our own look into CES and to the AARP Innovation Lab.
Absolutely. And again, we want to thank our guests, Steve, Rick, and Katy. And you can find those links to their products at maryfurlong.com. That's the place to go, where you can find our podcast too. We want to thank our sponsor also, the AARP Innovation Lab. And thank you for watching or listening. Remember to subscribe, and please stay safe.